mentioned it a few times on the channel that I am one of the guys in the group that is particularly interested in collecting.
Will make a fine addition to my collection.
Sort of older games and sort of polishing out the sets of stuff that I had already, either from, being a child all the way up, through teenage years and into adulthood. So I thought I'd spend a bit of time today on a little chat of the sets and subsets that I've been collecting. So when I've started looking into collecting games, I kind of broke it down into like a few different things that I wanted to do. I like the idea of trying to get a hold of like physical games that I would have played before, like digitally.
Get your ass back here, boy!
And obviously you have the whole instances that we've seen recently where like online storefronts go down. Deadpool was probably a really, really good example of when that game was then delisted as well. Some things like that can happen where when games aren't available to purchase, people get kind of really annoyed and the physical prices just shoot up. That hasn't happened too often in terms of games being delisted, but entire storefronts like Xbox 360 Digital Store, for example, is no more. So any of those games that never got ported out to the backwards compatibility catalogue, those games are stranded. There are one or two games behind me that fit into that category though, of games that were never ported forward, and then when that store was delisted, or taken down, sorry, those are gone forever. One of those examples is the game Gun, which I grabbed that on a whim because I thought, oh, that might actually go up in price because of that. I believe it like went up slightly, then sort of sat back down again. I've actually not played it. Heard really, really good things. Daz in particular has mentioned that he thought it was pretty good. So at one point we're going to have to check this out. But not purely from a delisting standpoint. Games like Gears of War 5 was one that is like a digital game I played. Never owned it physically. Skate 3, I believe, is the same. It'd be really, really cool if I could get them at some point on my travels to pop them in the bookcase behind me. Then we come to the next set of games, which is games that when I was younger or even as a teenager that I either hadn't even heard of before, or games when I heard about them I was like, I'm not entirely sure I'll like that, so just completely skipped out on. And it turns out those games are some of like the most beloved franchises of that era. And a good example of that would be the Sly trilogy. I have that on PlayStation, which is right here. I didn't know these existed when I was younger. Obviously there are 3 for PS2. I do not have the original PS2 ones because they're slightly hard to find and they're also kind of expensive. Like this cost me £58, but I like to buy Sly 1 and 2 and PS2 alone is around about 70 quid. Damn. And there are also quite a few games of that era that I wasn't allowed to play. So any of the Grand Theft Auto games, for example, I wasn't allowed them until I believe Vice City Stories was ported to PS2. So the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that all the PS2 copies of GTA are behind me, and that's because when I started this I was like, look, that's the first lot I want to quickly grab because it'd be really, really nice to have them all. Now that I'm obviously, I'm pushing 31, I'm pretty sure I'm allowed to play them. And there's other classics that I'd like to grab, like the Warriors. Always heard the Warriors was good. I feel like I maybe played it at someone's house once. Can't really remember. That would be one that's on my list.
You just made the list!
It'd be really, really fun to play it and grab it and give it a play. True Crime Streets LA is meant to be another classic of that game that's like not a GTA but is GTA.
What?
But again, was never allowed due to the age range. And then, Manhunt and Manhunt 2 would be a fun one, but if you looked at the prices of Manhunt 2, yeah. Then there's the third set of games, which is replacing games that I did own, did play, even if it was for like 5 minutes or an hour, or like we bought it because my sister wanted to play it and her and I would play. But between like a couple of house moves, these games have just completely disappeared. And like regardless of the quality of that game, it would be really, really nice to still have those in my collection, just to say that they're still there. This case right here I've got in my hand is a good example of that. So that is the game Eternal Ring. I have no real memory of playing this. Maybe my dad and I did. I have the case for that, no disc. I would like to at some point grab a disc when I've been out and about. I have saw 1 or 2 copies of this, but it's never really been quite good enough condition that I'd want to even part a couple of quid with, because there's no point if it's not in good condition, if that makes sense. And another one is when I open the case, we have a disc for a game, International Golf Pro, which is a game that my dad used to play. Do not have the case for that though, so at some point we're going to have to replace that. Did also encounter this problem fairly recently and started replacing some of those games. They were PS1 games like Croc 1, Toy Story 2, absolute classics of the genre. Could not, when I was younger, and maybe still to this day because I've not given it a go, defeat the final boss in this. It was absolutely ridiculous for a child of my age to be trying to beat that. It was so difficult.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity. Farewell.
Croc, I also never finished. We did play that on stream last year. I think that was last year, beginning of this year, not entirely sure. And that was a lot of fun. I was a bit of a careless child, so stuff like this then kept on happening. So this then leads me into one of the subsets that I have, is the Pokemon games. So I had a copy of Gen 1, 2, 3, 4 and the Gen 1 and 2 remakes. I had them all because those were my games. I absolutely adored them. But for some reason, they've all, with the exception of Fire Red cart only, completely vanished. I've been going through the process of getting these games again and then continuing on past that to get the Pokemon games that I haven't touched before. So, for context, I played Gen 1, 2 and 3, the remakes for Gen 1 and 2, and then stopped. For whatever reason, and I can't really remember why, just completely stopped playing them up until they brought out the Switch games, which I can't even remember what the first one of that would have been. I can't remember if that was Sword and Shield or Let's Go. And I've got them since, like, my wife and I, we both play them. So we both get, if it's like one of the dual titles, we'll both get one each, so that they'll slowly start completing on this shelf behind me. But these ones down here, I'm going to try and flesh it out and get them all. So we do have a couple of fun ones where I do have box copies of Red and Silver, which was the original games that I had as well. I did also have Crystal. For whatever reason, that has since vanished. The copies, the actual quality of these boxes though, like they are real, they are insanely good quality, so you can imagine how chuffed I am to have some of these. And then I started diving into, right, okay, we need to get some past that. I know that we don't have a Gen 3 here, more on that soon, that is a future tease.
You're teasing me, you naughty naughty.
But I do have a pretty decent copy of Pokemon Platinum, which I believe I've showed on TikTok maybe? Might have shown it here, can't remember. Got that for Gen 4, and we do have the Omega Ruby, so the Gen 3 remake, which I never played, obviously. This was kind of when I had my hiatus from Pokemon, I suppose. From what I played though, pretty good. And then we grabbed this one on the cheap, which is Ultra Moon. I will grab a copy of Sun or Moon at some point, just to then have them, but I want to try and get one of each gen first, so we'll get there. With the overall aim being that we will have one of each generation, so we still need a copy of Black or White 2, we need a copy of X, and I need a copy of Sun or Moon. And then once we get all of those, I can say for certain, we're good, we've got everything. With the eventual aim, I think I'd like to have boxed copies of all of Gen 1, Gen 2 and Gen 3, including the sort of beefed up version, so like a boxed copy of Yellow and a boxed copy of like Crystal, which very expensive, not looking forward to having to explain to the wife how I'll be able to, find £300 to do that. But it's a pipe dream, one day we'll do it. To then eventually have a copy of absolutely everything would be really, really cool, and just have this really nice long shelf down here that just extends right out for everything. That'd be sweet. And the last set of games that I've been looking at is ones that I missed out on due to like console exclusivity. So I had a PS1, had a PS2, and then transitioned to Xbox 360. So it's just built in the shop below me here. And started grabbing PS3 games recently because we never had one. And then we did have one, I didn't have as much interest because all the guys were on Xbox. Funny story, my dad wanted to start watching Blu-ray movies in the house, and back then a Blu-ray player was like 500 quid, 600 quid. It was insanely expensive when Blu-ray first hit the market, so it was actually cheaper to buy a PS3 and get that in the house so you could sit and watch his Blu-rays for about like, it was about 200 quid less. So I sat through in like a sort of sitting room that we had in the house, and he would just sit there and watch stuff. And for whatever reason, I just never actually played it unless my Xbox was broken. So like for a 4 or 5 week period when like I had to send it away because it died like everyone's Xbox 360 did originally. I played occasionally some games, so there are like 1 or 2 games behind me on the shelf. Games like I think he quite liked Everybody's Golf. He liked Far Cry 3. He liked those ones. For whatever reason, it never really took off for me, so I've been trying to kind of fix that. Continuing on in that theme, because there'll be games that sort of either I'd never played at all, God of War being a good example. Like I've got all of the God of Wars, other than God of War 3 for PS3 because I have the PS4 port, that I didn't play at all, so we've grabbed some of them to start making our way through them, and then grabbing ones where the series continued on where I'd kind of left it behind. So Ratchet & Clank was a good one where I had the first 3 and Gladiator, a couple of them went missing, and then I stopped playing it until there was the PS4 release of Ratchet & Clank. So on the shelf behind me, we kind of have most of them on the PS3 side, other than All For One. That is the only PS3 copy that I'm missing, and I need to grab a couple of PS2 ones, and then I can actually confidently say that that's another set done, which would be really, really cool to have that completed off. And then there's obviously 1 or 2 that, because of that initial exclusivity.
So that's against the rules, and you can't sit with us. Whatever. Those rules aren't real. They were real that day I wore a vest, because that vest was disgusting. You can't sit with us!
Where the hype came from, I just completely missed out on. So we spoke about it before in a previous video. Metal Gear Solid is one of those series where I never had much of an interest when I was younger, and then even though they ported them over and they weren't all purely PlayStation, it just never conned on that it was actually a thing. So hopefully one day we'll actually sit down and start bashing through them, because I've heard these are absolute classics. The real challenge though with the collecting is I only really have these set of shelves behind me to deal with for now. I live in a small flat. We don't have a crazy amount of storage to be putting all these things around the place, so this is kind of what we've got to deal with. But I have a few ideas to try and like maximise it a little bit. I'm going to try and get an extra shelf or 2 and shift some stuff off of the bottom shelf, because as you can see, this one's completely full and games are having to now stack on here. This maybe isn't ideal for where PS1 games are going to go, because I want to try and get a couple more. Like completing the GTA set would be really cool, so there's a couple of games we need to get to kind of do that. So because we've got a lack of space though, even with getting those minor upgrades to what we have, it has to kind of be all killer no filler. It's not just buy things for the sake of buying it, unless it's just a game that I used to have that's gone missing, childhood thing. That I'm okay with. We'll always find space for that. Yeah, that's what we've got so far in our collecting journey. The medium long term goal will be we will eventually move house in the next few years, and I will get a bit more space and be able to flesh it out. Like even a second bookcase would be enough. There's even like some games where I have like a few GameCube games here, and there's 1 or 2 that I would absolutely love to have. XD Gale of Darkness being one. That's a grail for me. If I ever had the money to go and just drop it on that game and play it as an avid lover of Colosseum, that would just be perfect.
It was perfect. Perfect.
Let me know what you think about the collection in the comments and what you guys are collecting at home. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, it helps the channel. I'll see you guys later.
You removed it from its original packaging.
No! It's no longer a collectible! Oh!
What a nerd.